Hi everyone, this is Bill Kenower for Author Magazine, and this month's conversation is with British novelist Annabel Abbs. We talked about her move from the world of high tech to fiction writing, about the need for privacy, about keeping your ideas private while you work on them, and about learning how to deal with the constant uncertainty of creative work. Enjoy. All right, Annabel, welcome. First of all, I'm in
Thank you.
Seattle. You're in London,
I'm in
where
London.
I like to talk to all my writer friends about, do you find this sheltering a bother or not that big a deal for a writer? How is it for you?
Oh, well, it's just like normal, sadly. Because you know what it's like, the writing life. We just sit indoors, squirreled away. We never go out. We never go anywhere.
Right.
So it is a bit more constrained, obviously, but I haven't. I think other people have experienced it in a much more, I guess, in a much more difficult way. But if you work from home on your own,
Yeah. This is our life.
we have such boring lives anyway.
All right. So the writing life obviously keeps you home. But when did the writing life start for you? Specifically, you've written a book about a young woman who, we'll get into that, famous father, but an artist herself, different, a performing artist, but an artist nonetheless. When did you recognize writing as being something that was interesting to you, that mattered to you?
Well, rather, I'm embarrassed to say it was rather late in life, actually. I think I was in maybe my mid 40s.
Wow.
And yes, I know, very late. And I'd had a completely normal job. I worked in sort of in tech for about 15 years, doing crazy things like I launched Apple in the UK and Dell.
Wow.
And things like that. But I had studied literature at university. And my father was a poet, so it was sort of in my bones. But I had tried, obviously, to get away from it and to have a sort of a normal life, like a normal person with a normal income. So it was late in life, and I had stopped working in my normal job, and I had these 4 young kids at home, and I was sort of spending my days at home, and I really found that really, really hard. And I stumbled across this story. I wasn't actually planning to be a writer, but I thought I couldn't find the information I wanted, so I thought I'd write it myself. And I sort of wrote. I used to write in the night when my children were sleeping. And I'd write in the night. And then after about 2 or 3 years of writing, I ended up, as one does if you do that, I ended up with this manuscript. And I just started, I realized that there was these things called writing competitions, because I knew nothing. So I realized there were these writing competitions where you could send in your unpublished manuscript. And, I thought, well, why not? I've written it. So I started sending it in, and I think I had some beginner's luck, because straight away it was longlisted and then shortlisted. And then I won a competition, which the prize was being published.
Wow.
So I had quite a straightforward route, if you like.
Wow.
And partly because I had no expectations. I think that frees you.
Oh, that
really
is, I cannot tell you. I've heard all sorts of writing stories. I talk to writers about the process, and the writers I know who had the freedom of no expectations, and I was not one of them. I had huge expectations, and it was like a burden around the entire process. It just weighed it down. And you know what the problem is, Annabel? I think it confuses the choices you make. It gums up the works. It puts too much pressure on every single choice you make. And I think that you can just relax in a way because you have no expectations. So it's a great way to start. And I envy you slightly.
I think it's partly you have no expectations, but no one else. I did it in secret. I didn't even tell my husband for about 2 years. So
really?
No one else.
How'd you keep it a secret from him?
I was doing it in the night.
He lives in the same house, I assume.
He'd be asleep, and I'd wake up.
Oh my God.
I wake up really, really early. So I usually started my day about 4 a.m. I'd wake up really early, and I'd have 3 hours before anyone even knew that I'd been up. So that meant, and because I also didn't do, lots of people here, and I know it's the same in the States, go and they do a master's in creative writing, which I think is a fantastic thing to do. And in many ways, I wish I'd done it because I was just so incompetent. But there was no one saying to me, Oh, do you think you'd ever be published? Oh, what are you working on? No one asked me anything. So in hindsight, I would recommend that as a way to go.
For someone, it's interesting. If you had taken an MFA class, you'd have learned a lot of stuff, but you would not have learned what you learned, what you knew intuitively, which is to not tell anybody, to do it in secret, to have no expectations. Craft and story and all that stuff is useful, but if you have all these expectations and you go around telling people, it will screw up all the rest of that. And so that intuition of yours, that private impulse, which is the best, it took me years to learn not to tell people about stuff I'm working on, except because I just get so excited about it,
Yeah,
it's no good.
I know.
It's no good. Wow. And so this was a novel.
Yeah, I have to say that the downside of doing it that way is that I had no writing friends. I was quite lonely. I had no one ever to say, what do you think about this? Or how would you approach this? There was no one to read my work. I had none of that. So that is the downside. I just feel I should put that out there for everyone who is studying for a master's, because that network of people I've now got lots of friends who've done a master's and PhDs, and they've got this amazing network of friends and people who read for them and give them feedback. And I didn't have that. So I guess if you take that route, that no expectation route, you have to be quite happy to have no writing mates.
Yeah. Well, but yes, it's true. And I had one main writing mate, which was my wife. She was a writer too. So that was enough for me for a while. Now I'm lousy with writer friends because of the work I do. But for a while, I didn't know any writers. I never met them. I didn't, the first published author I really knew well was my wife. And so it was just this weird relationship.
Oh, okay. Well, you're a bit like me then.
But I would always the difference is I always wanted to do it, but I was all squirreled away. Okay, so you published that book. So you were in tech, and so you were sort of, I assume, were you on the engineering side or the sort of management side, like project management sort of executive?
I was doing writing. I was writing speeches for CEOs. I was writing articles. I was writing presses. So I was writing. It was quite dull technical writing, but I was at least churning out sentences. So I think that's a definite advantage.
It helps.
Creative. No, but I knew the rules of grammar.
Yeah, I mean, that's all very well and good, but you know what it is to sit down to a blank page as opposed to, because the kind of writing you're talking about, it's a little more intellectual. You can sort of do it. You still have to be creative, but there's a kind of more of a mechanical aspect to it as opposed to the novel, which is just, you're starting from the void, which is necessary, right? Is necessary, but it's not like what the assignments you would get.
No, but I did feel as though I'd had a little bit of but actually more important than that was the fact that I just read all the time. So all my life I've read, and my first advice to anyone is just read all the time, and that I've never stopped reading.
So this is the first book of yours I'm familiar with, and so for my here, I'm going to show it. This is called Publicity. So for my American viewers, this is Annabel's first novel published in the U.S., but your third overall. So your first was, what was the name of the book that won the competition?
That's the one you're holding.
Oh, this is the one that won the competition.
Yes. So
I did not understand. I'm confused.
First one. So after I published it in the UK, quite to my amazement, really, it started to sell in lots and lots of overseas countries, but not America. America took quite a long time, and I'm not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure why, but it started to sell right across Europe, and in Russia, and in Poland, and Bulgaria, all sorts of strange little countries that I didn't even know that they would know about Joyce.
Sure.
So America, now actually France just bought it last week. So it's just been rolling out over a period of 4 years now, and
okay,
that makes sense. Yeah,
it does make sense. So all right, so
in America.
All right, so this is interesting. So quickly, this is a book about James Joyce's daughter. I was a bit of a Joyce fan myself. So I watched some documentaries on him, read about him a little bit, not to the degree that I have a good friend who's a Joyce nut. He's read Ulysses like 3 times.
Okay.
Just one of these. But I knew his daughter. He had a unique, special relationship with his daughter. So how much did you know about the Joyce family before you started writing, or was it just like he had a daughter, she was a dancer? Let me find out. Or had you really steeped yourself in that before?
No. That was the shocking thing. I had studied him at university. I had written dissertations on Ulysses and Dublin and portrait. So I was really familiar with him and his work. Not Finnegan's Wake, that came later. But then when I discovered he had this daughter, I was so shocked because I knew all about Nora. Obviously, she's the voice of Molly Bloom at the end of Ulysses. I know about Nora. I even knew he had a son. And then I can't even remember how it came about. I just heard that he had, I think a book came out in the UK, a sort of cartoonish book, a graphic novel. And she was threaded through it. And we did it in my book group. That's right. We did it in my book group. And I remember reading and thinking, James Joyce had a daughter. No, it must be a different James Joyce. Of course, it was the same James Joyce. And his daughter, it turned out, had this really interesting life in 1920s Paris, working as a dancer on all these stages. She had danced in a troupe through Italy and Belgium. So, she was quite an established dancer, really. And then, of course, she ended, I won't give too many spoilers away, but I think the story is quite generally known. She did end up living her last 50 years in an asylum and dying in an asylum in England, miles away from all her friends and family. But while she was completely forgotten about, all the men in her life were these legendary, iconic figures like James Joyce and Alexander Calder and Samuel Beckett.
And Beckett, that's where I heard of that. Beckett, that's where I heard of her. Beckett dated Joyce's daughter. Like, what?
His daughter, yeah.
Right.
So, and of course, Beckett would never talk about it. And Carl Jung destroyed all his notes, all the medical records, everything. Alexander Calder never mentioned her. And the Joyce family then destroyed all her letters and diaries. So she was, as soon as she was in the asylum, she was sort of obliterated. And the thing is, once you're in an asylum, you have no control over what, your voice, do you? That's it, you're locked up, you're gone. And so if everything outside of the asylum, for example, things you've written or letters about you, once they're all destroyed, that's it, you're gone. You literally have been erased from the face of the earth. So that made me very angry, which was why I wrote the book. And I wanted to understand her inner life. What was it like to have Joyce as a father? Because, of course, at this crucial period where she is at the height of her career, dancing on all these incredible stages, he is going through these, this whole obscenity court case in the States for Ulysses, which was, banned in lots of countries, including Ireland, and, of course, in America. And so I wanted to know, what was it like to have, a father who was deemed to be a pornographer? I wanted to know, what was it like to have an affair with Samuel Beckett? I thought, gosh, that was quite interesting. What was that like? And what was it like to be there in that little tiny, very intimate family and all those 120 flats and houses they lived in? How did it affect her? So actually, the story is it's a sad story, really, because it's true. In fact, the first time my agent tried to take it to American publishers, I'd completely forgotten this. She kept coming back with the feedback was they'd like you to change the ending to make it happier, more upbeat, and I was like, I can't.
This is what happened.
I can't change it. So I was completely forgotten. Maybe that's why it took a while. It had to find an editor who was happy with with that ending.
Right.
Which, I couldn't really make it any more cheerful. But it is quite cheerful in a way, because she has turned out to be such a profound influence on so many people, writers and painters and composers, in a way that her father possibly hasn't, and certainly her mother and her brother weren't. So in some ways, she's the name that's still out there, and the story that is still interesting people.
Right.
I don't know if does anyone read Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake anymore?
Well, Finnegan's Wake, who the hell is going to read Finnegan's Wake? That's a bear. Ulysses, this is the thing about books like Ulysses. Do you know Frank Delaney? Who did, he was a wonderful guy, and he and I had gotten to know each other before he passed. And this is always my issue with books like Ulysses and The Great Gatsby and all these great books, is you have to stop seeing them as, I believe, as an author, you have to stop seeing something as great in a certain way, because you put it in a realm it doesn't, because in 100 years, a whole new generation could decide it's crap, we're not interested, and it could go into the dustbin, because points of view change. It's so much a point of view, and you have to, I just don't believe in deifying artists of any kind. Does
Yes.
that make sense? Because you're an artist,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
book deserves on the same bookshelf as James Joyce's, in the same bookstore, in the same breath.
Oh, why? Thank you.
But I really feel that way,
You would agree with that.
you know? And so some people are reading it, but they're reading it like, a lot of them, I think, are reading it like a religious text almost,
Yeah.
as opposed to a work of art.
I read it twice, and I went back to school just to study it when I was writing the book, because I thought I've really got to understand this book. But I spent a year of my life reading Ulysses twice. That's a whole year gone.
Wow.
Was it worth it? It was worth it because I wrote the story of his daughter. But without that, I might question whether that would have been a good use of a year.
Well, I will say this. When first time I read it, I did find his painterly approach to rendering the physical world incredibly instructive. He was so elegant and measured and had such distance, but love and appreciation. I still marvel at, and I still find it instructive.
Actually, you're right. I learned quite a lot about the craft of writing from reading Joyce, to be honest. I did.
It's unique.
It's beautiful writing.
Yeah.
And in Dublin, and in Portrait. I mean, just beautiful writing.
It is. But you wrote beautifully too. And so now you're out sharing your work with the world. What's that like for you? You who worked in tech, because your words, it sounds like you were writing stuff that was being heard. People were speaking it, and you were writing stuff before the novels that was still being shared. You weren't just writing in your diary.
Yes,
you weren't just writing emails. But now this work of fiction, and what's that like for you being an author and having people read it and draw their own conclusions about it, et cetera, et cetera?
It's a very good question. What is it like? It's kind of weird. I think this is probably the case for all writers. You spend a lot of time, literally in your little sort of hole in your head, writing away, and then suddenly your publisher and your publicist appear, and it's like out there. You've got to go on stages and do all this stuff, and there's no easing into that. You come out of the hole. Right. Straight into the limelight.
Yeah. Yes.
If I hadn't worked for 15 years in a situation where I was having to do presentations all the time to groups of people, I think I would have found that sort of coming out, I would have found that really hard.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased I did what I call really glad I did the normal job beforehand, because I think it is hard to make that transition, isn't it? Don't you find 1 minute you're in your head, and the next minute you're talking to 200 people?
I thought I might want to be an actor. I had interest in the stage. And so I did the theater stuff. And I was the kind of person as a young man, if there was a microphone, I didn't know why I wasn't behind it. If I saw one, I was like, I'm supposed to be there. I don't know why, but I should be speaking. And if someone said, could someone speak? So that was never a problem. It's like, how do I get behind these microphones? So no, that wasn't a problem. But the skill to write and the skill to speak to people are two very separate skills, and they do not always overlap.
Yes.
At all. I could say. I
think you're right. So I do all of that publicity side, and I can do it because of the job I did before. But I'm not like you. That's not where I want to be.
That's not your happy space.
And I think that's my job. I have to get behind the microphone. It's my job. I'm not like dying to get there. I'd actually rather be in my little hole.
So this is interesting. I'm a writing coach. But I'm sort of like a life coach for writers. So I often deal with people similar to you in that they are grown people, sometimes with children, who have had regular jobs but would like to be writers. And the thing I have to help teach them is not just how to write. Sometimes I don't do that at all, but just how to live as an author. That it's a very different experience than the job you go to school for, and then you get this paycheck and da. So you talked about your regular job, and you've transitioned to that. If you had to describe to someone the difference between a quote normal job and what you have now, which is not really a job, it's now a life, but you're getting paid for it, so we call it a job, right?
Yeah.
What would you say that biggest difference is? It just to you that you've liked and maybe didn't like?
The biggest difference of all is if you can make enough money to live off is the freedom and the independence. And again, I'm speaking as someone who hasn't got a publisher saying you must keep producing this sort of work.
Right.
Some of my writing friends have, very tight contracts. They have to keep producing the same sort of stuff. Right. I don't have that. I can write what I like. So that freedom, the freedom, particularly as a parent, to spend time with one's kids, to go and do the school run, not to go on a commute every day. So the freedom to be able to work anywhere you like. I think you almost can't put a price on that.
Yeah.
Not to have to go into an office and have 5 bosses telling you what to do. All those.
I've never done it.
You've never done it?
Well, I was a waiter for 20 years, but that's different.
Oh, I think that's probably preferable.
It was to me. I could have done the office thing, but I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't mentally couldn't do it.
Yeah. So I suppose the freedom, and also the freedom to be in your head and to follow the stories that you want to follow.
Yeah.
So if you can step away from the pressure, I think a lot of writers put themselves under quite a lot of pressure to be on social media, to be tweeting regularly, to be constantly coming up with ideas. I think if you can take some of that pressure away, it's very enjoyable life. What do you think?
It's the only life I could possibly live. I am I'm an introvert, but likes to do this sort of thing, loves to talk to people, loves to teach. So I need a certain amount of that, but I need to be alone. I need to follow my own ideas. I need to do what I want to do. I don't know how else to live. But you do have to get used to the uncertainty. You have to get comfortable with the uncertainty.
Yes.
You know what it's like? You went to your job. There was probably there's uncertainty in everything. You go to your regular job. You don't know what your boss is going to say. You don't know. But there's I'll get this amount of money at the end of the week, and I'll go to this office, and there will be these people there, and so on. But with writing, the uncertainty of life is just right in your face. You can't dodge it, because you don't even know, do you, Annabel, what's going to happen when you sit down at the page? Really?
You don't know that. And what's more, you could spend 2 years on a novel and not even know if anyone is going to buy it.
That's right.
That is 2 years of work. And possibly it could just sit in a drawer.
Right.
The rest of your life. You've got to live. So yes, there's a lot of uncertainty. The uncertainty has its, once you become used to it though, it does have its upside, doesn't it?
Oh.
I think it creates a certain amount of drive.
Yes.
There's that element of uncertainty and fear are so closely coupled.
Right. Yes, they are. Well, this is here. I'm not here to publicize my own book, but this is actually the book I published a little called Fearless Writing. So
there's no such thing as that. Oxymoron.
That's right. Well, you can't. Well, I actually believe writing exists in a fearless place. You might be afraid when you're not writing, but when you're actually writing, you're not afraid. Yeah. When you're actually doing it.
When you're deep in, you're not afraid.
It's the absence of fear at that point.
Yes.
But I think that when you learn to deal, because I have a podcast where I start by saying what it takes to write the book you want to write is what it takes to lead the life you want to lead. And I really believe that. And the thing is, if you can learn how to deal with the uncertainty of the writing life, which you have to emotionally to be able to not go nuts from it, right? And not beat yourself up. That carries over into the rest of your life. I feel like you can translate that into the uncertainty of raising children, the uncertainty of, because you learn hopefully you learn to control what you can control and give up what you can't, and learn that can be enough. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing that maybe you're putting this in with uncertainty is that dealing with rejection.
Yeah.
Dealing with rejection. Now that I did find quite hard.
Yes.
And I avoided a fair bit of it because of the route I took, just by luck. But I obviously have since had rejection, and I've been surrounded by other friends who've been, and then there's just, the negative reviews, the negative comments. There's always someone who doesn't like it. So I have learned to completely switch off from that. When the Joyce Girl first came out in the UK, I read every review, every comment. And I decided that was a very, very bad thing.
It is. Go back in your hole.
If I'd gone to do a proper master, someone would have told me that. But after that, for the next book, I didn't look at a single thing, and I still have not read a single comment or review.
That, you know what?
You say
Andre
that?
Dubus, the novelist, he wrote House of Sand and Fog and a wonderful memoir called Tony. He's been at this game a while, and it was just a few years ago that I was interviewing him. And he said to me, you know what? I finally stopped reading my reviews. I finally gave myself permission. And he's probably 20 years into his career, had a lot of success. And he's like, it's great. I was like, I know. I don't think writers, I'm going to go one step further, Annabel. I think writers should not only not read their reviews, I don't think you should read anybody's reviews. I don't think you should swim in the water of what one person thinks about another person's work. I just feel like get out of it, man. It's no good to you.
No, but it's also meaningless, though, isn't it?
It is.
It's so subjective. So what's the point?
I agree. I agree. I mean, if they want to say wonderful things about you, great. And it helps sells books, great. But my wife had a great take on it. She said a review is a description of an experience. And you have your experience.
Yeah.
And it is an experience. The way it is. All right. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So what book number are you currently working on? 4?
So, 1, 2, 3. I've just finished book number 5. I've just finished book number 5, literally in the last few days in lockdown.
Wow. Like finished, or finished a draft of it?
Finished the second draft. So I've worked with my publisher on it, on the first draft, and I've just finished the second draft, and she'll probably come back with more edits.
Congratulations. Let me ask you this. So what is something in writing this 5th book, which I hope we get to read here in the US, because Joyce Girl, quite good. But that's just my opinion. But what...
I'm going to ignore that.
Okay. What is the big takeaway from writing that book that you learned that you think you might take to your 6th book?
Right. So the book I've just done was nonfiction. I did something completely different.
Was it about you or just a subject?
I don't know. It's memoir threaded through the lives of 6 women.
Okay, gotcha.
I just wanted to try something else. And I suppose I would say, I mean, we're all different, aren't we? But for me, I wanted to keep trying different things. And although, obviously I've got I work with a few editors on different types of books, but I've got one editor who says, I will only publish, your historical fiction. And that is quite restrictive. Perhaps I don't want to do historical fiction one day.
Right. Yep.
So I've got another publisher who does another sort of writing that I do. And I guess what I've learned is keep trying new things. Don't let anyone, even if you need it for the money, don't let anyone restrict you if you don't want to be restricted. So experiment, even if it's just like playing around, experiment with flash fiction or short stories or poetry or non-fiction or biography, whatever it is, even if you think it's not going to go anywhere, because I think it just keeps those neurons firing.
Yep.
It's probably not terribly lucrative advice, really. That.
Well, you don't know. We just don't know. It could be. It could bust out. Well, Annabel, I like you very much. You're a cool person. I'm glad I got to talk to you, although I'm not quite done with you. Actually, I've got one more question. And so now you're going to have to put your deep thinking hat on. And I want you to reflect on all the writing you've done, even going back to your non-author days. And finish this sentence. If writing has taught you anything, it's taught you what?
How to be alone.
Hey, but answer me this. When you're alone and working, this is true for me, I never feel less alone than when I'm connected. Yeah? Yeah,
that's the joy of it though, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think people are frightened. I mean, for a long time, I thought about writing, and this is back in the day when I was writing my speeches and things. I thought, I could write a novel and nice lifestyle, And then I thought, actually, no, I can't spend all day on my own. I would go mad. I can't spend all day on my own. In fact, I've learned that I can, because as you say, you're not really alone.
No,
you're actually pretty busy in your head.
Yes, you are.
Characters getting in the way.
Annabel, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Bill. It was great to talk.